When one is drawing in charcoal, it's a really good idea to think about the idea of what sort of charcoal you work with. I tend to prefer thick charcoal because thick charcoal is capable of a delicate line, as well as one can use the side of the charcoal to make a broad line, but a thin piece of charcoal can't make a thick line. The other thing that I found when I was a student is I didn't really like charcoal for the simple reason it kept breaking in my hand, and that was because I was using thin charcoal. So one of the things to think about is the idea of blocking in big areas of tone first of all. And remember that when we're making a charcoal drawing, we're thinking about light, the light that's falling on the figure. So we're less interested in the delineation of a figure. We're much more interested in the interplay of light. So when you're starting off, those ideas that we've learned from the Tonal study are really important. Why are you seeing the figure? Are you seeing the figure as a light shape against a dark background, or a dark figure against a light background? Or is there some kind of interchange between those 2 points? The great beauty of charcoal is that it's very malleable, and as you work the drawing, particularly as you start to work on a decent paper, this is a 220 gram acid free cartridge, the surface of which is not too smooth. I mean, you want something which has got a bit of bite for it to accept the charcoal, but as you certainly start to work the drawing, then the charcoal becomes more and more fluid. So initially one's thinking about the idea of this figure, and this particular figure is in a dark space. Clearly with any kind of medium, it's a good idea to think, do you go in too dark too soon? So you can build up to the tone once you're confident that you understand where those tones are. Obviously, in terms of moving the charcoal around, you can use your finger, although some people would say that you can leave also a kind of slightly greasy deposit on the paper, which then makes the charcoal stick a bit more. I think at this sort of stage, once I've got the sort of basic shape of the figure, the thing that I'm looking towards now are the kind of relationship of parts, and I think about things in terms of pairs. So where is one knee in relationship to another knee? Where is one ankle in relationship to another ankle? Where is one elbow in relationship to another elbow? Where is one shoulder in relationship to another shoulder? Where is the central line of the figure? What's the main directions? And it's very easy sometimes to sort of oversee those directions. Like we've discussed before in other exercises when we've dealt with tone, half closing one's eyes to try to see the broader areas of light and dark are really advantageous. If you're working from the model, I've seen it done before now where some people look at the model through a screen, a sort of blurred screen. You could also look at your model reflected in your mobile phone. Again, that has the ability to simplify the tone down. Gombrich referred to the idea of the beholder's share, and I think that contained within that is the idea that with charcoal drawing, or any kind of tonal drawing really, you're not interested in delineating the figure. Instead, what you're thinking about is the light that's falling on the figure, and subsequently, if you get that right, then the brain will put into the drawing the information that's missing. It will see the things that you haven't drawn. Sometimes the problem can be if you overdraw. So one's trying to think as well about where the light's coming from. This figure is being illuminated from up here. So up here is a real bright, intensive pool of light. Subsequently, the space around that must be darker. So although there is light on these legs, they're nowhere near as light as the light on that chest wall. So this is where lots of those kind of exercises that you've been doing start to fall into place. Initially, the idea of the negative space, the shape around the figure can be useful. The notan, where are my darkest values? The duotone, where's my next darkest value? If you go into a 5-tone study, then you can begin to think, okay, within those parameters, where are my light values, where are my dark values? Where are my lighter values, where are my darker values, etc. So it's a sort of gradual evolution of the drawing. Obviously you can do quite a bit on the surface of the paper, just wiping things away with a finger. There comes a point where you might need to refine your drawing a bit further with the use of an eraser. Putty rubbers work really beautifully. They can be moulded and shaped. Normal plastic rubbers again are really good. Even a loaf of bread, a slice of bread can be used to erase. They were used largely before the invention of rubbers. As I've started to make this drawing, I've realised that the head that I'm drawing is too small, so it's really simple to move that charcoal around to reconfigure the drawing. And it's not being frightened to make the drawing. Yes, you're going to get a bit of charcoal on your hand, you're going to be a little bit dirty, but it's not to worry about that. It washes off very quickly, it's not going to stain you in any way, it's not going to ruin your clothing. The most important thing is, finding that sort of physicality for the drawing. And I think that charcoal is a very sort of physical medium. You move it around, you carve out the figure, you're finding the form. It's amazing sometimes how just a short break from a drawing can give you fresh eyes. And what I've started to realise is that I've got the proportions of this figure wrong. So I'm just pushing back the drawing. And with charcoal drawing, it can be really useful sometimes to work on a tonal ground rather than white paper. So I'm just going to block in some general tones, and I'm going to try to see some of those sort of big, simple directions for the figure. So try to see some of those big, simple shapes again. That sort of clarity of the figure. I think personally one of my favourite sets of charcoal drawings are by Nicholas de Stael, which are incredibly simple, sort of broken down, massive planes of tone. It's the classic, you can get very convinced by your own drawing, and sometimes seeing afresh can be quite challenging. Distance can be advantageous. Sometimes looking at your own drawing in a mirror can also be really useful. A classic term as well in charcoal drawing is this idea of lost and found edges. So where the figure kind of disappears into the surrounding murk. And great examples of that can be found in Seurat's drawing. Also in some lovely oil studies by Degas, you see that kind of disappearance of the figure into the murk. So refining that drawing, then it can be a case of working back into the drawing. What I've done here is I've cut some rubbers into some specified shapes. This will just give me a bit more control. So it's a little bit like kind of sculpting with clay. You can add, you can subtract, you can rebuild, you can redefine. All the time trying to create something which has got the spirit of that individual, spirit of the light that's falling on them at that particular moment in time. You can obviously build and refine the drawing as much as you want, but your initial aspiration is to get the essence of that figure down, the essence of that figure in space. As you keep working the drawing, you can refine the drawing. With charcoal, you want to try to avoid drawing into the drawing with white chalk as a way of increasing the light, because what you then start to do is you start to work in a very different kind of way. You're really dealing with pigmentation rather than the transparency or the opacity of the charcoal to give you the tone. And it's that transparency and opacity that gives you that luminosity to your drawing. Obviously charcoal is fugitive. The beauty of it is that it can be moved around, but the disadvantage of it is that it can be moved around, so you do need to make sure that your drawings are fixed at the end and obviously using something like fixative or extra firm hold hairspray is a really good thing. But the thing about charcoal is, don't be frightened of it. Just remember that you have to think about the drawing quite differently than the way that you would think about a linear drawing. This is not about kind of delicately drawing the outline of the figure and then filling in the tone. This is about going straight in with the tone and finding through that addition and subtraction process where the figure is. Stepping back, reviewing, rethinking all the time, you know, is that the way that the figure works?